College football has changed forever. If you have not heard, if you have not seen, the House versus NCAA settlement is officially live. Well, I believe it starts July 1st, but the parameters have been set. I understand a lot of people, they'll hear the legal terms or the fact that it's a court case, kind of turn it off. It's not about the sport. It may not affect them. This is foundationally changing everything we know about college athletics. I think there's some good things, but I think there's also some bad things that may be around the corner. And if you want more detailed and concise tweets about it, Ross Dellinger has done a fantastic job around this. But I want to quickly walk through in simplified terms around what are the impact of this court case, what was the reason why it had to exist, and what are my thoughts around it. But at the end of the day, I want to hear from you. This is from Snap to Whistle Football. We only talk about football around here. So whether you give me a like, comment, subscribe, anything to pop up on your feed one more time would mean the world to me, because truthfully, all I want to do is talk about football. If you've been following college athletics at all in any capacity, especially football, you know NIL has taken over the sport. Yes, the transfer portal, yes, the playoff format has been a point of discussion because that's been easier to discuss. But the money portion and what NIL has been, without any guidelines or just borders, it's just been the Wild West over the past couple years. And this takes a massive step forward in at least putting some sort of guardrails. The foundational piece that has absolutely changed the game, which you could argue has not been like that for quite some time. I mean, I remember in high school, whenever we had to make an argumentative essay, I always talked about how student athletes aren't really students first, although they try to be portrayed as such during the time that they couldn't get paid at all. That was always my topic of discussion because I didn't believe in it. Now it's kind of official. Not even kinda, it isn't. The genesis of this bill is they can now be paid directly from the schools through revenue sharing, which we will discuss in detail further, but there's a couple other pieces to this. NCAA President Charlie Baker, for instance, described it as a new beginning and a pivotal step toward establishing long-term sustainability for college sports. I think that long-term point is directly saying, hey, listen, we could not keep going at this or the sport would crumble. But let's talk about one of the parts that isn't around the revenue sharing. They will be paying back a historic payout of $2.8 billion to over 400,000 current and former student athletes. This dates back from June 15, 2016 to, I believe, September 15, 2024, and it will be dispersed over a 10-year period. The NCAA will be responsible for about 40% of the cost, while the other 60% will be covered by reducing its revenue distributions to the 32 Division I conferences over the next decade. The distribution of this back pay is not uniform across all sports or athletes. A specific formula determines the payout, factoring in elements such as the sport played and the prominence of the athlete's institution. Approximately 75% of the fund is going to be earmarked for male football players. Men's and women's basketball players are collectively allocated about 15 to 20%, with 15% of it going to men's basketball and 5% going to women's basketball. The remaining 5% is then distributed among all other sports. The simple way of putting it is they're trying to pay back the athletes that could not have these opportunities. And frankly, I don't have enough information to truly say, well, why couldn't they have done it earlier? There hasn't been any reports on why 2016 is the reason. If you know, I would love to hear it. But I appreciate any effort from the NCAA that, even though they're being forced to, is going to try to repay those players. But what this is also going to represent is how much football will dominate any kind of revenue distribution, which I understand a lot of people do get that, but this will also just have it in legal terms that football is going to dominate the conversation. So let's talk about the revenue sharing and what the salary cap looks like in college football. Beginning July 1st, 2025, student athletes will be able to get paid directly from their schools. A key component of this new system is the establishment of an annual revenue sharing cap. For the 2025-2026 academic year, participating schools can distribute about $20.5 million annually to student athletes. This cap is derived to up to 22% of the average revenue among the schools in the ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, Pac-12, and SEC from media rights, ticket sales, and sponsorships. The cap is designed to increase annually by at least 4% and will be recalculated every 3 years, with projections suggesting it could reach as high as $33 million by 2035. You do have to opt into this settlement, and according to Ross Dellinger, there's a big debate on who may opt out and what that could look like. Schools will have the discretion to determine which players will receive payments and the specific amounts. It is widely anticipated that the majority of this compensation will be directed towards players and revenue-generating sports, primarily football, followed by men's and women's basketball. And like I just mentioned, most schools are going to follow the format of the back pay, which is the 75%, I believe 20 to 25%, and then the 5% to the other schools. With some schools going as high as 85% of what they're going to distribute in their salary cap. The implementation of that $20.5 million annual cap is directly tied to the percentage of the average conference revenue. Functions very similarly to a salary cap in professional sports. This structure moves college athletics further away from its traditional amateur foundation and closer to a professional league model. Why is that important? Well, we have already been projecting for years at this point that the Big Ten and the SEC potentially may go down to a super league. And not to bring up the automatic qualifiers debate that is going on with the playoff format for college football, but the SEC and the Big Ten have already produced rumors around, well, we could just go make an entire thing to ourselves, a whole super league. We've talked about how we wanted these automatic qualifiers, but the ACC and the Big 12 continue to shut us down. You can't say we haven't tried to throw you a bone. We've tried to negotiate and compromise. Because you guys are the bad guys, you guys are the problem, we're going to go make a super league. That's what I'm projecting. While the cap aims to introduce a degree of competitive balance, the inherent discretion given to schools in allocating these funds, coupled with the annual increase in the cap, suggests that the competitive arms race for talent will persist. Institutions will now compete not only with their facilities, coaching staff, and academic programs, but also with their ability to strategically maximize and distribute these direct payments. This could lead to intense internal competition for resources within athletic departments and potentially new forms of pay for play that operate within the established cap. The focal point of my opinion around this is this sounds good in theory. In practice, I think this is going to be a mess. I think of a video that I watched recently discussing what makes college football so special and why that's being taken away. And they talked about how the academia side of things, the leaders in academics, tend not to understand the sport. The reason why the NFL and the NBA works is because the people that are in charge understand their sport, they understand their role. But when you do get people that do not understand your sport, they end up making decisions that are best fit for themselves and more money comes in. One of the big complaints on what's going on with the WWE is because they were acquired by TKO, they're making business decisions without realizing that they're taking away what's the core of their entertainment, what the product is. And though this does put some structure in and gives a baseline for athletes to get paid, I could still see many problems being born from this. The biggest one being we are still driving towards a world where a super league does come to fruition. One of the things that concerns me the most is a casual fan will see that super league and see the big matchups and follow exactly what they want, which is the big time matchups, the big time brands, the ones that take over the entirety or the majority of college football and not the niche ones within the group of five or even some of the Big 12 and ACC colleges. And I think those are the schools that are going to be harmed from this. They're not going to have to use $20.5 million. They don't need to get all the way up to the finish line because they're not going to be producing that much at the lower level Division I schools. Pair that with the fact that they will be part of the ones that are going to have to back pay this. It said about 60% of that $2.8 billion is going to go to all of those conferences, not just like the Power Four. And I've been very vocal on the fact that I think the group of five should have their own playoff, not for the sake of, I think that the group of five needs to be separated from these bigger institutions, but I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we'd be assuming that the group of five and the Power Four are automatically playing the same level of sport, because now there's a huge focus on the postseason. And what's being lost is the importance and how special the regular season is, and that's what makes college football. And that's not even the last part of this bill. Because then you begin to wonder, what about the third-party NIL transactions? Is it just going to be $20.5 million for every single school, or are they going to be able to make money outside of this? And basically what they've introduced is an NIL coat check. A crucial aspect of the House settlement is the establishment of a third-party clearing house known as NIL Go. This entity is designed to bring greater transparency and scrutiny to external NIL agreements. Its primary purpose is to review all NIL deals exceeding $600 to ensure that they serve a valid business purpose and represent a reasonable range of compensation or fair market value. NIL Goal will be operated by an international accounting firm, Deloitte, under the oversight of a newly formed independent body called College Sports Commission. The system is aimed to curb disguised pay-for-play schemes, where boosters or collectives might attempt to pay athletes simply for their athletic participation rather than legitimate NIL activities. If a deal is rejected by Clearing House, schools retain the option to make up the difference for the athlete, but any such payment would count against their salary cap. This part is insane to me as well. The Power Five will increasingly assume responsibility for administrating and enforcing financial benefits and NIL rules, allowing the NCAA to increasingly shift its focus away from enforcing rules prohibiting and limiting financial benefits in college sports. This suggests a decentralization of power and enforcement, which could potentially lead to more efficient oversight, but also raises questions around consistency across all Division I schools not directly bound by those conferences. Basically saying, what about the Power Five? I don't know if it will work in practice. I'm so curious about, A, who are going to be the ones that opt out of this potential salary cap? What are the repercussions there? What are going to be the big repercussions when it is talked about in broad daylight around a denied NIL deal? What's going to happen with these collectives? Because from what it sounds like, if I were to pay $10, $15 into a collective, I don't really know where my money's going outside of just acquiring more talent. That's not really a business transaction. That's just me trying to give money when you couldn't directly pay from the schools. What is that going to look like? I'd be curious on what constitutes fair market price when you have partnerships and dealerships like Lamborghini, like lining up their cars for a recruit's visit. Even in the state of Texas, they just passed a bill where high school athletes are going to be able to get NIL deals. Does that mean that they have to funnel in through this clearing house or this NIL Go? There's so many different things that are going on that I'm just still left with questions. And I do think this is a good step. I think having parameters is a good thing. A lot of people may push back and saying, why are we limiting these athletes and how much they could make? But my pushback would be, what other options did we have? This is not something that is going to be sustainable with the sport. We are not even sustainable with what's going on with the transfer portal. They are still trying to figure out the postseason at this point. And you can't just let this NIL space just run rampant. At some point, you have to put some rules down because the NCAA is not going to do it. And now you're putting more power into the conference's hands, which we still should have a commissioner. I've talked about that before. I'm just appalled. As I read more into this, I like some of the things, but I'm left with more questions. And I think that leaves it back to you. I want to hear your opinion. I want to know what you think of this because I understand my perspective is relatively limited. I'm waiting and seeing what's going to happen, but I want to hear from you. What is your instant reactions to this? It's unfortunate because I wanted to make a video about the Oregon Boar offense from Chip Kelly. That's still in the pipeline. I'm still working on that one. That one's probably going to be released mid-June. But I had to get this one out because it's very relevant to the sport and it's changing the foundation of it. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch today's video. I won't hold you for too long. I'll see you guys for the next one.